I rushed into the rehearsal hall, still clutching the icy hot pain patches I had bought for Julian. But in the next second, I heard Hudson laughing inside. The 63rd time. It worked. I told you she'd even blow off her final audition for the National Dance Theater just for Julian. Only 3 more to go. Someone chimed in, laughing. Once she makes a fool of herself at the kids' recital, the 66 paybacks will be complete. I froze outside the door. For 3 years, I thought Julian's coldness toward me was just his personality. Until Melanie, draped in Julian's jacket, smiled and asked, "So, for the last 3, how do you want to play her?" Julian didn't answer, but his silence was all the answer I needed. I looked down at the pain patches in my hand and suddenly smiled. It turned out the person I was desperately running toward had never even thought of catching me. If that was the case, I was done playing this game. As for what they owed me, I would claw it back, dollar by dollar, tear by tear. Chloe's POV. I didn't even have time to change out of my point shoes before I bolted up to the 3rd floor. I was still clutching the icy hot pain patches I had bought for Julian. 10 minutes ago, Julian's best friend, Hudson, sounded like he was on the verge of tears over the phone. He said Julian had broken his leg during rehearsal and couldn't even stand up. And I, like a fool, believed him. For him, I abandoned my final audition for the National Dance Theater, an opportunity one had spent 3 years preparing for, and took a cab across the entire city just to save him. The door to the rehearsal hall was slightly ajar. There were no painful groans inside. No doctors either. Julian was sitting casually on a chair with his legs crossed, a towel draped over his knee. He didn't look injured at all. Hudson was holding up his phone, recording and laughing hysterically. The 63rd time. It worked. I told you. As long as we use Julian's name, that little puppy Chloe will throw away her dream audition in a heartbeat. Someone next to him chimed in. She's so gullible. It's been 3 years. Does she really think Julian actually likes her? Julian didn't laugh. He just casually spun the water bottle in his hand. All right, stop recording. What? Feeling bad for her. Hudson nudged his shoulder on purpose. If she hadn't used dirty tricks to steal Melanie's solo back then, Melanie wouldn't have been depressed for so long. You promised you'd get Melanie her 66 paybacks. Don't go soft on us now. Melanie sat by the mirror, wearing Julian's jacket. She looked so fragile, her voice practically dripping with innocence. Let it go, guys. Chloe didn't mean to. She loves Julian so much. If she found out these 3 years were just a game, she wouldn't survive it. Good.
She shouldn't.
Hudson sneered. Whatever Melanie suffered back then, we're making her pay back double. So, what's the plan for the last 3? Melanie looked at Julian and made a sweet, delicate suggestion. Let's not be too harsh. Just make her publicly admit she stole my spot back then. Give her a little warning. She's so proud. Making her get on her knees and apologize in front of everyone will probably hurt her worse than death. Outside the door, my hands turned ice cold. The plastic bag in my hand crinkled under my tightening grip, deforming the pain patches inside. It turned out that the heart I had poured out for 3 years was nothing more than a payback checklist to please Melanie. I remembered standing in a torrential downpour for 3 hours just to bring him an umbrella. I remembered skipping meals to save up and buy him expensive designer dance shoes. I remembered his cold face, his constant lateness, his canceled plans. I used to think he was just emotionally awkward. Now I knew every cold shoulder was a precisely calculated cut, designed to make another woman smile. For the 64th payback, how about we mess with her kid's recital at the end of the month? Hudson's laugh was pure venom. Doesn't she care about those little brats more than anything? Julian didn't stop him. His silence was sharper than any knife, completely slicing away my very last shred of hope. I didn't push the door open to confront them. I didn't break down and scream. I just quietly tossed the bag of pain patches into the hallway trash can, turned around, and walked down the stairs.
Chloe's POV.
When I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. Chloe, the Savannah Contemporary Dance Company is still waiting for your RSVP. If you really decide to come here, your dad and I will help you pack tomorrow. But can you really leave Julian behind? I wiped the cold tears from the back of my hand. My voice was hoarse but absolute. Mom, I'm coming. I'll sign the contract tomorrow. Behind that door upstairs lay 3 years of my life, treated as a cruel joke. But starting today, I wouldn't take a single step backward. I returned to my apartment and immediately pulled out a heavy-duty black trash bag. I had rented this apartment specifically to be close to Julian so I could take care of him. Those blue slippers on the shoe rack that Julian had complained about 1,000 times? In the bag. The cheap keychain he threw at me, the costumes I stayed up all night tailoring for him? In the bag. And then the notebook filled with Julian's likes and dislikes. I flipped to the very last page. Clamped, there was the receipt from our first official dinner date. That day, Julian had looked at me with a patronizing smirk and asked, "Chloe, you've been chasing me for so long. Aren't you tired?" With a blushing face, I had replied, "I don't mind the fatigue as long as it's you." It turned out that day was just number one on his payback list. Expressionlessly, I tore the receipt to shreds and threw it, along with the notebook, into the trash. My phone kept vibrating. Julian sent a text on Snapchat. "Did you leave those pain patches at the door? Why aren't you answering?" Then came a barrage of FaceTime calls. I stared at the screen, looking at the name that used to make my heart race, and pressed accept. "Where did you go? Hudson said you were here." Julian's voice carried a hint of his usual arrogant irritation. "I went home," I said, my voice completely flat. "What about your audition?" "I didn't go. I missed it." Julian fell silent for a second, then his tone softened with a patronizing tone. "Hudson was just joking. I didn't know he'd use something like that to lie to you. I'll make him apologize to you later. Stop throwing a tantrum." I almost laughed out loud at his casual dismissal of it as a joke. I traded my entire career for his leg, and he thought a lazy apology from his friend could just erase my ruined life. No need. I cut him off coldly. "I hope you guys enjoy your little game." Julian's heart skipped a beat. "Chloe, what do you mean by that?" "I mean, you disgust me. Don't ever contact me again." With that, I hung up and immediately blocked Julian on Snapchat, Ins, and my contact list. The world was finally quiet. I opened my laptop, replied to the Savannah Contemporary Dance Company's email to confirm my employment, and sent my resignation to the owner of my current dance studio, promising to finish the children's recital at the end of the month before leaving. Once everything was done, I looked around the empty apartment and let out a long, heavy breath. For 3 years, I had filled Julian's life to the brim, only to corner myself into a dead end. Now I was going to reclaim my life, inch by inch. Chloe's POV. The next day, I went to work at the dance studio, as usual. During the lunch break, Julian appeared at the classroom door, his face dark, holding a warm caramel macchiato, my old favorite. "You hung up on me last night and ignored me all night. Are you done throwing your tantrum now?" He handed the drink over, his brows furrowed as if he were the one who had suffered a great injustice. I didn't even look up as I continued sorting through the kids' registration forms. "I'm working. Solicitations aren't allowed in the studio. Please leave." Julian's hand froze midair, his expression instantly turning ugly. "Chloe, I came all the way here to find you. What more do you want? Hudson just has a big mouth and I actually did twist my ankle a little. Do you have to be this petty? Don't look at the floor when you're lying, Julian. It makes you look pathetic." I finally looked up, my eyes as cold as ice. Busted, Julian's eyes flickered with panic. He reached out to grab my arm, but a sweet, high-pitched voice called out from the end of the hallway. "Julian." Melanie, holding 2 Broadway tickets, fluttered over like a butterfly. She gasped as if she had just noticed me, covering her mouth in mock surprise.
Oh.
"Chloe, you're here too?" "Julian, didn't you promise to go to the theater with me tonight? Why are you still here?" Today was my 3-year anniversary with Julian. We had originally agreed to have dinner tonight at the cozy little diner where we had our very first date. But Julian had clearly forgotten. Seeing Julian's face stiffen for a fraction of a second, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Melanie, your acting is so bad. How did you even get into the dance academy in the first place?" Melanie's tears came on cue. She grabbed Julian's sleeve, looking incredibly hurt. "Chloe, please don't misunderstand. If it bothers you, I'll just rip these tickets up. You guys should go celebrate your anniversary." I had been disgusted by this manipulative, victim-playing act 1,000 times before. But now, I just found it hilarious. "Please don't rip them. A toxic jerk and a fake snake. Honestly, you two are a match made in heaven. Have a great movie night." With that, I slammed the classroom door right in their faces. I shut out Julian's thunderous face and Melanie's fake sobbing. Getting rid of toxic trash felt absolutely amazing. After class, it was already dark. The moment I stepped out of the dance studio building, Julian blocked my path in the freezing wind. "Chloe, come with me," he commanded. "Get lost," I replied, not even sparing him a glance. Julian finally lost his temper. "Have you had enough? Melanie cried all afternoon because of your sarcastic remarks. Just how long are you going to keep making a scene over nothing?" Melanie stepped out from behind Julian at the perfect moment, her eyes red. "Chloe, I know you've always felt guilty about taking my solo spot back then, but I forgave you a long time ago. Don't take your anger out on Julian."
Slap.
Chloe's POV. I slammed my heavy binder right at Melanie's feet, my voice cold and sharp. "Melanie, Do you need me to help refresh your memory? Do you want me to pull up the records of how you were publicly replaced by the director because you were late to dress rehearsals and kept messing up the choreography? You have zero talent, so you rely on playing the victim to get sympathy. You've repeated that lie 100 times, and now you actually believe it yourself, don't you? Melanie's face turned paper white. Shaking with anger, she screamed, "You're lying." "Enough," Julian roared. "Chloe, do you have to be so malicious? Apologize to Melanie right now." There it was again. Whenever Melanie cried, I was automatically the villain. I looked at him coldly, pulled a set of keys out of my bag, and threw them right at Julian's chest. "Those are the keys to your studio. I'm returning them. Julian, we are over. We are breaking up." Julian caught the keys, completely stunned. He thought I was just blowing off steam. He never expected me to actually bring up a breakup. "What do you mean?" A flash of triumph crossed Melanie's eyes, though she kept up her good girl act. "Chloe, don't be impulsive. Julian really cares about you." "Shut up, you manipulative snake," I barked, cutting her off in disgust. I turned back to Julian. "Your 66 paybacks list is short by 3. Too bad, I'm not playing anymore. Enjoy your little game by yourselves." The mention of the list hit Julian like a lightning bolt. He froze in place, utterly paralyzed. Without giving him another second to process, I turned on my heel and walked briskly toward the subway station. Julian instinctively tried to chase after me, but Melanie grabbed his arm tightly. "Julian, Chloe must have misunderstood something. Don't go." Julian stood frozen in the cold wind. Under the bright neon lights of the subway station, I didn't look back even once. Julian's POV. For the first time in my life, I felt a terrifying reality sink in. The Chloe who had always stood in the exact same spot waiting for me was completely gone. A breakup? How could she possibly bear to break up with you? In the studio, Hudson listened to me and laughed so hard tears came to his eyes. "Julian, you're just taking her too seriously. She's playing hard to get. Once she cools down, she'll come crawling back to you like a loyal dog." I sat on the sofa, staring at the keys on the table, my mind in absolute chaos. "The 64th payback is still on," Hudson suggested carelessly. "Doesn't she have that kid's recital at the end of the month? Let's steal her backup audio files and the lead dancer's costume. Let's see how she handles that disaster. When she has nowhere else to turn, she'll come crying to you for help." I snapped my head up, my voice dangerously cold. "I told you, do not touch her recital. And do not touch those kids." Hudson gasped, startled by my outburst. "Are you crazy? We're only 3 steps away from finishing the list. Why are you suddenly feeling sorry for her?" Melanie walked over and pulled at my sleeve, looking incredibly sorrowful. "Julian, are you blaming me for making things difficult? If that's the case, let's just forget about her stealing my spot back then. I don't mind carrying the hurt." If this had been the past, I would have pulled her into my arms and assured her she didn't have to suffer. But now, looking at Melanie's face, Chloe's words kept ringing in my ears. Late to dress rehearsals, replaced for messing up the choreography. A wave of disgust washed over me. I felt like I was being used as a weapon. I shoved Melanie's hand off my arm. "Don't touch me. The game is over." Melanie froze, a dark, vicious look flashing deep in her eyes. Chloe's POV. Today, I was running the final dress rehearsal in the dance studio. The studio owner, Martha, walked over and whispered, "Chloe, someone just called the front desk asking about where we store the recital costumes and audio files." It felt off. I let out a cold laugh. I didn't even need to think to know it was Hudson and his cronies. They wanted to ruin my hard work using their old tricks? In their dreams. I didn't panic. I calmly gave Martha my instructions. "Martha, lock all the original costumes in the office safe right now. Also, I had the supplier rush a batch of identical backup costumes. I need you to quietly lock them in the trunk of your car. Copy the audio files onto 3 separate flash drives. One for you, one for me, and one for the sound engineer to keep on them at all times. And slip the head of security a $50 tip and buy a box of donuts for the team. Tell them that on the day of the show, if anyone from Julian's studio comes anywhere near backstage, call the cops immediately." Martha looked at my swift, ruthless arrangements. Shocked but incredibly relieved, she said, "Chloe, you used to trust them way too much." I was blind back then. I've cured my eyes now. I looked at my fierce, determined reflection in the mirror, a cold smirk playing on my lips. I was no longer the pathetic girl who compromised everything for Julian. For the recital at the end of the month, not only was I going to pull off a flawless show, but I was also going to give Julian and Melanie a gift they would never forget. Julian came to the dance studio just as I was running a rehearsal with the kids. I was wearing a simple leotard, my hair pulled up in a neat bun, correcting a little girl's posture step by step. I looked busy and completely at peace. Julian stood at the door, realizing his presence didn't distract me at all. In the past, the second he showed up, I would have run out to ask if he had eaten, if he was tired, or if he wanted water. Now, I only spared him a single glance before turning back to the class. After class, Julian blocked me. "Are you breaking your lease?" I nodded. "Yes." "Where are you going?" "Savannah." "Who said you could leave?" The moment the words left his mouth, Julian himself froze. I, however, chuckled. "Do I need your permission to go anywhere, Julian?" Julian's face darkened. "That's not what I meant." "Then what do you mean?" He couldn't answer. He was just too used to me revolving around him, too used to his name always occupying the top spot in my schedule. My sudden departure made him instinctively want to force me back into my place. "The Savannah company is mediocre." He scrambled for an excuse. "If you stay here, I can help you get another audition with the National Theater." "No, thank you. Chloe, don't throw away your career over a tantrum." I packed up my teaching materials and looked up at him. "I didn't miss my audition because of a tantrum, Julian." Julian's face went pale. I didn't say another word. Some wounds don't hurt any less when talked about. They only give the abuser another chance to make excuses. I brushed past him and walked out. Chloe's POV. Julian reached out and grabbed my wrist. "I can make it up to you." I stopped. "Julian, don't talk about making amends like it's charity." I slowly pulled my hand out of his grip. "What you owe me isn't just an audition slot." After that conversation, I officially submitted my lease termination that very day. My landlord asked if I was just fighting with my boyfriend, offering some unsolicited advice. It's normal for young couples to fight, you know. Breaking a lease and finding a new place is a huge pain. I smiled gently. "We're not fighting. I just won't be living here anymore." I didn't offer any further explanation. This apartment was too close to Julian. It was so close that I used to check his studio windows to see if the lights were on, so close that one call from him could get me running to his side in minutes. I used to think it was convenient. Only now did I realize I had placed myself in a position where he could summon me like a pet. Terminating the lease wasn't just about moving. It was the first time I actively removed myself from his reach. Seeing my resolve, the landlord stopped trying to persuade me and just asked to settle the utilities at the end of the month. I agreed. Walking out of the leasing office, my chest didn't feel empty. Instead, I felt like I could finally take a deep, clean breath. Julian stood in the distance, his face turning pale. In the past, he always complained that I wanted too much. I wanted him to reply to my messages, wanted him to have dinner with me, wanted him to remember those cheap anniversaries. But now that I wanted absolutely nothing from him, he realized how little he actually had to offer. He said he'd help me get another audition. That wasn't making amends. That was him trying to tape up a vase he had shattered, then demanding my gratitude. I didn't look at him again. I returned to the classroom. The kids crowded around me, asking if I was feeling sick. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Julian standing outside the door. I bent down to tie a little girl's ballet shoe. She looked down at me and whispered a sweet, "Thank you, Miss Chloe," before standing up and dusting off her knees. Julian still stood there. He didn't leave and he didn't come in. I didn't spare him a second look. He used to enjoy this kind of care for me. I used to bring him water, pack him meals, organize his scattered papers, and heat up a mug of milk when he rehearsed late into the night. Back then, he never said thank you. He never thought he needed to. He just took it all for granted, like a permanent fixture in his life. Now he was seeing that I could bend down and smile for someone else. Only, he was no longer the one receiving my care. The 66th payback came anyway. It wasn't Julian's doing. Hudson and a few of his friends snuck into the studio's storage room during a lunch break. They stole the lead dancer's recital costume and stuffed an old, ill-fitting outfit in its place. They wanted to watch me ruin the show, completely unaware that I had a backup. When Martha pulled up the security footage, Hudson was still smirking. "It was just a prank, okay? It's not like we actually ruined the show." Standing to the side, hearing those words, I found it incredibly pathetic. For the past 3 years, every single injury they inflicted on me was swept under the rug as a joke. Me waiting for him until midnight was a joke. Me missing my audition deadline was a joke. Me being humiliated in public was also a joke. The moment I got upset, I was labeled as someone who can't take a joke. But this time, I wasn't going to take it lying down. Chloe's POV. Hudson was still leaning against the storage room doorframe, his hands casually shoved into the pockets of his designer sweatpants, when the 2 police officers walked through the front glass doors of the studio. The smirk on his face evaporated instantly. "What the hell is this?" Hudson barked, straightening up. His eyes darted. Between Martha, me, and the uniformed officers. Chloe, are you insane?
You.
Called the cops over a stupid costume? Officer Davis, I said calmly, stepping forward with my phone in hand and gesturing toward the security monitor behind Martha's desk. This is the individual who forced the lock on our equipment room 20 minutes ago and removed custom-made performance attire commissioned for our upcoming recital. The pieces were bespoke, hand-embroidered by an independent artisan in New York, valued at $3,400. That puts it well into grand larceny territory in this state. Hudson's face flushed and ugly, mottled red. Larceny? I didn't steal it. It's a joke. It's in the trunk of my car in the back alley. Then you unlawfully entered private property, broke a physical lock, and transported stolen property worth over $3,000 off the premises. Officer Davis said, unhooking a pair of handcuffs from his utility belt.
Turn
around and place your hands behind your back, sir.
Wait. Call Julian.
Let me call Julian, Hudson yelled, backing away until his spine hit the brick accent wall. Chloe, tell them to stop. You know this was just about the list. It wasn't real. I don't know anything about your games, I replied, my voice steady, devoid of heat or malice. I only know that you compromised the safety of the studio and the performance my students spent 6 months preparing for. When the metal cuffs clicked around Hudson's wrists, the studio fell into a dead silence. The receptionist held her breath. 2 parents waiting in the lobby stared in sheer disbelief, already pulling out their phones. Within 20 minutes, Julian came bursting through the double doors. He hadn't even bothered to take off his rehearsal knee braces. His hair was messy, his chest heaving as if he had run 5 blocks straight from his studio. Chloe. Julian stopped 3 feet from me, breathing heavily. He looked around the lobby, taking in the lingering tension, the open safe, and the vacant spot where Hudson had been standing before being hauled into the cruiser outside. What did you do? Hudson's dad is on the board of the Regional Arts Council.
Do
you have any idea what calling the police on him will do? It will hold a criminal accountable, I said, without looking up from the schedule I was revising with Martha. He's 23, Chloe. A felony record will ruin his entire career. Julian's voice cracked with frantic frustration. He reached out to grab my shoulder, but Martha stepped firmly between us, her arms crossed over her chest. Mr. Vance, Martha said icily, if you touch my staff, I'll have the officers waiting at the curb come right back in for you. Julian pulled his hand back as if burned. He looked at me, his eyes rimmed with raw red veins. Why are you doing this? You've never been like this. It was just a stupid costume. We can pay for 10 of them. I'll write you a check right now. For $10,000. Just go down to the precinct and drop the charges. I finally looked up. For 3 years, that face had been the center of my universe. I had mapped every line of his brow, studied the subtle twitch of his jaw to anticipate his moods, and swallowed my own pride countless times just to keep him from frowning. Looking at him now, I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, not even disgust. Just an immense, barren emptiness, like staring at a stranger in a crowded subway. Julian, I said softly, do you remember the night before my audition for the National Dance Theater? Julian paused, thrown off by the sudden shift. What? I had a fever of 102, I continued, my voice measured and smooth. You called me at 2 in the morning because you left your lucky warm-up jacket at my place and claimed you couldn't sleep without it. I walked 4 miles through the freezing rain to bring it to you. When I got to your door, you took the jacket, said thanks, and shut the door in my face. You didn't even ask why. I was shivering. Julian's throat bobbed. Chloe, that was payback number 41, wasn't it? I smiled faintly. You thought my dignity was cheap. You thought my dreams were disposable. But the law isn't a game you can play with Melanie to settle an imaginary score. Hudson broke the law. If his future is ruined, he ruined it himself. Chloe, please. Julian's voice dropped to a desperate whisper. He looked around, suddenly realizing that the parents in the lobby were filming him. Don't do this. I'm sorry. I swear to God, I'm sorry. I didn't know Hudson would go this far. I told him to drop it. You told him to drop it after you watched him make 63 cuts into my life. I interrupted, turning my back to him. Martha, please call building security and have Mr. Vance removed from the premises. He is disturbing our dress rehearsal. Chloe. I didn't turn around. Behind me, The security guard stepped in, his heavy hand clamping down on Julian's shoulder. For the first time in 3 years, it was Julian being escorted out into the cold, watching a closed door that would never open for him. Again, Julian's POV. The police station smelled of stale coffee and industrial bleach. Hudson sat behind the interview table, his designer shirt wrinkled, his face pale and swollen with dried tears. His father, Arthur Reed, was pacing the hallway outside, screaming into his phone at their family attorney. When Arthur saw me walking down the corridor, he marched over and shoved me hard against the wall. "This is your fault, Vance," Arthur hissed, his finger jabbing into my chest. "You and that little manipulative girl Melanie. My son is facing a grand larceny indictment because you two couldn't keep your pathetic high school grudges to yourselves." "Mr. Reed, I didn't know." "You didn't know?" Arthur scoffed, his face inches from mine. "Hudson told the detectives everything. The spreadsheet, the 66 paybacks, the prank calls, the sabotaged auditions. Do you think the prosecutor is going to look at that as a harmless joke? It's premeditated harassment, Julian. And if Hudson goes down, I'm dragging your name and that pathetic studio of yours straight into the mud with him." Arthur turned on his heel and stormed back toward the attorney. I sank onto the wooden bench in the hallway, my hands trembling uncontrollably. My phone buzzed. It was Melanie. I answered, my voice hoarse.
What?
"Julian, where are you?" Melanie's voice was breathy, filled with manufactured
Panic.
"Hudson's mother called my mom." "Why did Chloe call the police?"
Is she
"Trying to ruin all of us?" "You have to talk to her. She'll listen to you, she always does. Just tell her I'll apologize to her in private if she drops the charges." Listening to that sweet, fragile voice that I had spent 3 years defending, a sudden chill ran down my spine. "Melanie," I said slowly, "why did the director replace you as the lead soloist 4 years ago?" The other end of the line went dead silent. What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice tightening.
You.
"No, why? Chloe sabotaged my shoes before the final evaluation. She made me fall." "Chloe didn't sabotage your shoes," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I went back to the Academy archives yesterday afternoon," I asked Director Howard directly. He showed me the attendance logs and the disciplinary board records. Melanie's breathing turned sharp and erratic. "You missed 8 mandatory rehearsals," I continued, each word feeling like a lead weight pressing into my lungs. "You showed up to the technical run-through intoxicated. The director cut you because you were a liability to the entire ensemble. Chloe was selected because she stayed until midnight every single day, learning both your parts in case you failed." "Julian, listen to me. You lied to me," I whispered. "For 3 years. You cried on my shoulder, told me she stole your life, and watched me treat the only person who actually loved me like dirt on the bottom of my shoe. I did it because I loved you." Melanie suddenly shrieked, the mask slipping off entirely, revealing the bitter, venomous tone underneath. "Chloe was nothing. She was just a quiet, boring nobody who followed you around like a stray dog. Why do you care about her now? You were the one who agreed to the list. You were the one who stood by and watched every single time. You're just as guilty as I am. Julian Vance. You don't get to play the saint now." I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just hung up the phone and pressed my face into my hands. She was right about one thing. I wasn't innocent. I was worse than Melanie. Melanie was driven by petty jealousy, but I had weaponized Chloe's pure, unconditional love against her just to feed my own ego and play the chivalrous hero for a liar. I remembered the time Chloe waited 4 hours outside my apartment in the snow because I told her I had a craving for hot soup from Chinatown. When she finally handed it to me, her fingers were so frozen she couldn't untie the plastic bag. I took the soup, gave half of it to Melanie, and told Chloe her hair smelled like grease. She had just smiled, apologized, and promised to wash her hair before seeing me next time. A sharp, suffocating pain tore through my chest. I doubled over on the hard bench, gasping for air, but the emptiness inside me was a bottomless pit that no amount of regret could ever fill. Chloe's POV. The municipal theater was packed to maximum capacity. Over 400 parents, local arts patrons, and young students filled the auditorium. Backstage, the atmosphere was a whirlwind of hairspray, pink tulle, and the crisp scent of rosin. Lead group, 5 minutes to overture. Martha called out, checking the call, bored with a radiant smile. The lead dancer, an 8-year-old girl named Lily, stood before me in her backup costume. It was an ethereal dress made of layered seafoam tulle, fitting her even better than the original that Hudson had locked in his trunk. "Miss Chloe," Lily whispered, clutching my hand. "My mom said someone tried to
Cancel our show.
Is that true?" I knelt down, smoothing the silk ribbon of her ballet slipper, and met her wide, anxious eyes. "No one has the power to cancel your hard work, Lily. The stage belongs to whoever has the courage to stand on it. When the curtain goes up, forget about everything except the music."
Can you do that for me?
Lily beamed and nodded fiercely. "Yes, Miss Chloe." As the overture began to swell from the sound booth, Martha hurried over and leaned down to my ear. "Julian is outside in the lobby. He bought a front row ticket from a scalper for $500. Security asked if we should throw him out." "No," I replied smoothly, checking the pins in Lily's hair. "Let him watch.
Let
Him see what a real performance looks like when his games have no power over
it."
The lights dimmed. The velvet curtain rose. For the next 2 hours, the stage was an explosion of grace, discipline, and
Joy.
the choreography I had poured my soul into for the past 4 months unfolded seamlessly. Every transition was sharp, every child danced with absolute abandon, and when the final crescendo echoed through the hall, the entire auditorium erupted into a standing ovation. Roses and bouquets were tossed onto the stage. The applause was deafening. I walked out from the wings to join my students for the final bow. As I bowed to the audience, my eyes inadvertently swept across the first row. Julian was sitting dead center. He looked hollowed out. His face was sunken, his designer jacket looked loose on his shoulders, and tears were streaming silently down his cheeks.
He was
Clapping frantically, his hands red and raw, looking at me as if I were the only light left in an utterly dark world. I held his gaze for less than a second. Then my eyes moved past him, landing on my parents sitting in the 5th row, waving proudly with a bouquet of white lilies in their hands. I smiled brightly at them, bent down to lift Lily into my arms, and took a final, deep bow. Julian didn't exist anymore. He was just an empty seat in a theater full of
life.
Chloe's POV. The morning train to Savannah was scheduled for 7:45 a.m. The platform was damp with morning mist. My parents stood beside me, helping me check my 2 large suitcases. "Everything is packed, sweetie," my mother said, smoothing my coat collar with a tender smile. "The company director in Savannah already sent over the rehearsal schedule for next Monday. They're giving you the lead in the Autumn Contemporary Showcase." "I know, Mom," I said, hugging her tightly. "Thank you for everything." "Chloe," a ragged, breathless voice cut through the hum of the train engines. Julian came sprinting down the platform, ignoring the shouts of the station attendants. He was clutching a thick manila folder in one hand and a velvet jewelry box in the other. He stopped 10 feet away from us, bent over, gasping for air as if his lungs were on fire. My father took a step forward, his jaw set, but I placed a gentle hand on his
Arm.
"It's fine, Dad. Let me finish this." I walked toward Julian, stopping just out of arm's reach. "Chloe, please, just 5 minutes," Julian begged, his voice cracking. He held out the manila folder with trembling hands. "Look at this. Please just look at
it."
"What is it, Julian?" "It's the deed to my studio," he stammered, his eyes wild with desperation.
I
"Transferred 51% of the shares into your name. It's registered with the city clerk. It's yours. And Director Howard from the National Dance Theater agreed to hold a private audition for you next Tuesday. I pulled every favor my family had left. I got you the slot back, Chloe. You don't have to go to Savannah." He flipped open the small velvet box. Inside rested a vintage platinum ring set with a single sapphire, the exact ring I had pointed out in an antique shop window 2 years ago, which he had dismissed as tacky junk. "I know what I did was unforgivable." Julian wept openly, dropping to one knee on the dirty concrete of the platform. "I cut ties with Hudson. I broke off everything with Melanie. She's being investigated by the Arts Board for fraud.
I
will spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Just don't leave. Please.
Chloe.
I can't breathe without you." Commuters on the platform stopped to stare. Whispers broke out. A man on his knees, offering a business a national edition and a diamond ring. To anyone watching, it looked like the climax of a tragic romance. I looked down at the man kneeling at my feet. 3 weeks ago, This gesture would have made me cry tears of gratitude. 3 months ago, I would have surrendered my entire future just to hear him say he
Loved me.
Now, looking at the platinum ring and the legal documents, I felt nothing but a quiet, profound pity. Julian, I said, my voice clear and carrying effortlessly through the morning.
Air.
Do you know why you're kneeling right now? He looked up, hope flickering faintly in his tear-stained eyes. Because I love you, Chloe. I finally realized how much I love you. No, I replied, shaking my head slowly. You don't love me. You never loved me. You're kneeling because for the first time in your life, you lost control of someone who gave you everything for free. Julian's face went chalk white. You took my kindness and treated it like weakness. I continued, looking straight into his shattered eyes. You took my dreams and turned them into a scorecard to amuse your friends. You think offering me the studio and this audition makes up for 3 years of systematic cruelty? That's not love.
Julian.
That's just you trying to buy back your own clean conscience. Chloe, no, that's not true. Keep the studio, I said, stepping back toward my train. Give the audition to someone who still cares about your validation. As for me, I don't need your charity to dance. Chloe, please. He scrambled forward on his knees, reaching out to grasp the hem of my coat, but my father stepped firmly between us, blocking his hands. The conductor's whistle blew, sharp and final. I turned around, picked up my carry-on bag, and boarded the train without looking back. As the heavy steel doors slid shut and the train began to roll smoothly down the tracks, I looked out the window. Julian was still on his knees on the receding platform, his hands clutching the empty jewelry box against his chest, screaming my name into the empty mist. I reached up, pulled down the window blind, and leaned back into the comfortable
Seat.
The train surged forward into the morning sun, carrying me toward Savannah, toward the ocean, toward a life where my stage belonged to no one but myself.
Chloe's POV.
Savannah smelled of salt marshes, sweet tea, and aged moss hanging from ancient live oaks. The Savannah Contemporary Dance Company was housed in a converted 19th century cotton warehouse with towering brick arches and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. The marley floor was pristine, the natural light poured in like liquid gold, and the air was filled with the rhythmic thump of bare feet and the breathless counting of dancers who loved the art more than their own egos. Again, from the transition in Measure 42. Artistic director Marcus Vance, no relation to Julian, a coincidence that had made me smile on my first day, clapped his hands from the front of the studio. Marcus was a former principal with the Paris Opera Ballet, sharp-tongued, demanding, but entirely dedicated to genuine artistic truth. I stood in the center of the floor, my leotard damp with sweat, my hair pulled back in a loose, functional knot. The music swelled, a haunting, driving cello suite. I didn't dance with the rigid, anxious perfectionism I had clung to in the city, where every step was calculated to avoid Julian's criticism or to compensate for Melanie's sabotages. Here, my movements were expansive, ferocious, and unbound. When I leaped into a grand jeté across the sunlit floor, I wasn't jumping to prove my worth to a judge or a man. I was flying simply because my body had wings. When the music cut out, the 30 dancers in the ensemble stopped, turning to look at Marcus. Marcus lowered his clipboard. He walked slowly across the floor, stopped in front of me, and stared into my eyes for 3 long seconds. Where were you hiding for the last 3 years, Chloe? Marcus asked, his deep voice echoing in the rafters. I was lost in the noise, director, I replied, catching my breath. Well, you're found now, Marcus said, turning to the entire company. Chloe will be dancing the principal solo in the opening piece for our North American
Tour.
Program starts in 6 weeks. Dismissed for lunch. The studio erupted into cheers and pats on the back for my new colleagues. There were no side eyes, no venomous whispers, no checklists pinned to dressing room lockers. Just artists who respected the work. That evening, I walked along the riverfront cobblestones, holding a cup of iced
Coffee.
My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Martha back in the city. Martha, you won't believe what happened today. Julian's studio is officially insolvent. After Hudson's parents settled a civil suit with us out of court to keep him out of state prison, Arthur Reed pulled all of his foundation's funding from Julian's company. Melanie was formally expelled from the Regional Dancers Association for ethics violations. She tried to show up at Julian's studio yesterday to beg him for money, and they had a physical screaming match on the sidewalk that ended with the landlord changing the locks. I read the text twice. A year ago, hearing this might have brought a sharp spike of vindictive satisfaction. But now, standing by the Savannah River as the evening breeze rustled the Spanish moss overhead, all I felt was a mild, distant detachment. They had built their entire world on cruelty, deceit, and arrogance. It was only natural that the moment the foundation of their cruelty gave way, the entire structure collapsed upon them. I typed a brief reply. Thanks for letting me know, Martha. Give the kids a hug.
For me.
Rehearsals here are incredible. I locked the phone, dropped it into my bag, and looked out over the water where the cargo ships were gliding quietly out to sea. I was free. Julian's POV. 1 year later, the Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts was illuminated against the crisp autumn evening. I stood across the street, huddled in a worn trench coat with a collar pulled up against the biting November wind. My hands were shoved deep into my empty pockets. Over the past 12 months, I had lost everything. The studio was gone, liquidated to pay off debts. My reputation in the metropolitan dance circuit was completely toxic. No reputable academy would hire me even as a substitute instructor once the story of the 66 paybacks leaked through the dance community. I was currently surviving by teaching basic movement classes to seniors at a community center in Queens. I had spent my entire month's savings on a single mezzanine ticket for tonight's performance, the Savannah Contemporary Dance Company National Gala Tour. I crossed the street and walked into the grand lobby. Everywhere I looked, critics, patrons in tuxedos, and renowned choreographers were buzzing with anticipation. On the towering promotional banners hanging from the marble columns, there was only one face.
Chloe.
She was captured mid-motion, arched back in a breathtaking display of strength and grace, her eyes fierce, untamed, and luminous. Underneath her name, the New York Times pull quote read, "A transcendent force of modern dance.
The
undisputed revelation of the season." My throat tightened so violently I could barely swallow. I took my seat high in the balcony, clutching the crumpled playbill in my trembling hands. When the house lights dimmed and the orchestra began its slow, majestic ascent, the curtains parted. The stage was a minimalist landscape of light and shadow. And there, standing in the solitary pool of white light at the center of the world, was Chloe. The moment she moved, the entire 5,000-seat hall stopped breathing. Her dancing was no longer the careful, sweet, accommodating ballet of her youth. It was raw power. It was lightning captured in muscle and bone. Every extension of her leg, every arch of her spine, every turn across the stage told a story of a woman who had walked through hell, broken her chains, and crowned herself Queen of the Ashes. She commanded the space with an authority that left the audience paralyzed with
awe.
Sitting in the dark, tears streamed continuously down my cheeks, dripping onto my worn coat. I remembered the girl who used to pack my lunchboxes, who spent 3 hours in the rain with an umbrella, who looked at me as if I were a god while I treated her like a nuisance. I had held the rarest, purest diamond in the palm of my hand, and I had crushed it into the dirt just to make a venomous snake laugh. Now, she was up there, bathing in the light of the gods, untouchable, unreachable. When her final solo concluded with a breathtaking, suspended leap into darkness. As the final chord struck, the theater remained dead silent for a single, stunned second. Then the explosion came. The entire audience rose to their feet as one. Bravo shouts echoed off the gilded ceiling. Bouquets of red and white roses rained down onto the stage like a storm. The lights came up. Chloe walked to the front of the stage, flanked by her director and ensemble. Her chest rose and fell with exhilarating breath, her face glowing, her eyes bright with triumph. She took her bow, deep, proud, and completely whole. I stood in the balcony, clapping until my palms bled, sobbing uncontrollably. "Chloe," I choked out, but my voice was instantly swallowed by the roaring thunder of 5,000 standing patrons cheering her name. She looked up, smiling radiantly at the balconies, at the boxes, at the world that had finally recognized her brilliance. Her eyes swept across the vast sea of faces. She didn't see me, and even if she had, I knew with absolute, crushing certainty that I was no longer a ghost in her memory. I was nothing. Chloe took one last bow, turned her back to the auditorium, and walked arm in arm with her fellow dancers into the bright, endless light backstage. The heavy velvet curtain fell, separating our worlds forever.